That is right. This is the Real Estate Heavyweights podcast, and we are coming to you on a Tuesday for a Real Estate Heavyweights University episode. We are taking a deep dive into the world of flipping. I'm Ashton Hines. I am a new flipper. I'm working on number 4. I have a real estate license, but I also have a full-time W-2 job, and so I'm trying to juggle everything, trying to figure out how to invest and flip and do all that stuff, and have a job and be dad and do all the things. So if you want to learn how to do that and get into the investing world and just start learning, you just follow me. I'm making all the mistakes that you will not have to make. If you will just pay attention, I will try to clear the path for you, because it seems lately my mistakes are coming in waves and I'm learning constantly on what not to do the next time. So there to help me out, one of my good friends and real estate mentors, and he's just been super helpful in getting my flips finished lately, is Tavis Westbrook, and he is with us here today. How's it going, Tavis?
I'm doing well. Always a pleasure doing these. This has been fun.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, basically, we're turning a mic on to the conversations we have anyway, because, we communicate a lot. I know you have these types of conversations with a lot of your buddies that flip, and you're in the world. You've been doing this now for well over 10 years, and you live it, and you have a lot of insight into what's going on, the things you should do, shouldn't do, how to lay things out. And, one of the things, you were just talking about, one of the things that you're constantly doing is looking for deals, and you're looking at a new deal over in Carrollton by where I live. And, I hope you pick that up so you can start working on a project nearby. And I think that'd be, great to watch up close and talk about here. And as we're talking about flipping, the last episode, if you haven't tuned into that, we talked all about financing, and we talked about how I finance my deals. It talked about how you do yours mostly through banks. I use private money and hard money, and I've tapped into a 401k before. So a lot of your creative financing, I've done that there. I've never done owner financing or any of the sub-2 stuff. That's out of my realm of knowledge right now, but that's also an option we didn't really talk about, but it's something that you can get into. We have other episodes on how to find a flip, what you're looking for, how to start figuring out how much a flip might cost you as far as rehab goes, how to categorize a flip. And so today, what we're going to talk about is, okay, you got this house, you found it, you figured it out, it's a decent investment, you've run the numbers, you figured out how to pay for it, and you pulled the trigger, and you've got it. And you've got this, you went to closing, and here we go. Now what? And how do you set yourself up for success for that first week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, so you can get the ball rolling and you can get through with this project and make some money? And honestly, this is where I have struggled. Especially early on, you don't know what you don't know. And so setting up systems, setting up processes, having things lined up, super important. So Tavis, why don't we start there? You got this house, you went to closing, you're excited. Now what? And I think honestly, it probably started even before closing to get your processes going. So take us through that initial phase of getting a flip started.
Yeah, so it's very important to kind of plan ahead and have your ducks in a row. A lot of times, even I'm guilty of this, of acquiring a property, getting it under contract, and then saying, I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. But by the time I close on it, I definitely know, am I going to hold it? Is my plan to keep it? Is my plan to flip it? And most everything I buy needs some kind of renovation to it, whether I'm holding it or midterm renting it or flipping it. So as far as doing the renovation part goes, those all kind of follow the same schedule. So time is money. So the faster that you can get these things done and scheduled, as Ashton's talked about before in other episodes, what the daily burn rate is, especially doing hard money and things like that, it can get very expensive very quickly. And it's important to track these things and be ahead of the curve. So obviously setting up utilities, Ashton talked about a mistake he made here recently of not getting his water turned on the Mapleton house. Mm-hmm. So obviously having utilities on, because when the guys do start, they're going to need power. They're going to need electric. I'm sorry. They're going to need electric power. Same thing. Gas is one of those things that we typically forget because there's not a lot of utilities that use gas. And you don't necessarily need hot water, right, when you're flipping the property, but you do need heat. So if you have a central HVAC system, this is something you want to check out prior to closing on the property to see if you're going to need gas heat on, especially coming into this cooler weather that we're starting to have now. So that's something that gets missed quite a bit. It's important to go ahead and do that, and water, obviously. So you want water on, especially when you are dealing with paint and texture, concrete work, getting into landscape. Obviously, you need water on. So those are all important things that you need to make sure you're doing just on the utility side, and have a system in place for that. Then, more importantly, is lining out your trades. So I typically start hitting my trades up a couple weeks prior to when I need them, and just giving them address, giving them information, letting them know, like, hey, I've got this project coming up. This is what's going on. Even if maybe the painter, for instance, is 2 or 3 weeks out after I take possession, meaning I won't be ready for him until then, I still let him know. Mm-hmm. That way he knows, and he's putting it in his pipeline to make sure he's aware of it, and he's kind of preparing for me as well. So I'm going to do this with my drywall guys. I'm going to do it with my roofers. I'm going to do it with any of my trades that I need to line up, my electricians, my plumbers, people like that get busy and, need to schedule me, especially if they're like the type of trade that needs to be scheduled 2 or 3 weeks out. So some things that you can do prior to closing is obviously line out if you're going to do foundation work, essentially. So you want to line out your guys, have your bids ready on that, be ready to go day one. So knowing how a house is built or knowing the steps of a home is very important in this, even if you're doing renovation, because you need to know like what comes first and what comes second. So for instance, you can't build a house without a foundation first. So if you're renovating the home, foundation repairs are first, even before doing the roof, because you could put a roof on and then do the foundation, and it causes the roof to shift. Mm-hmm. And now you've buckled your shingles, your brand new shingles, and now you've got to bring the roofer back.
I know on foundation work, how long do you typically wait after you shift the foundation to do work? Can you go ahead and start? I know it wouldn't be recommended to do sheetrock or caulking or tile work right after you shifted the foundation. Is there enough time that you wait, or is it just kind of natural? It's going to take enough time to get people in there. You don't really worry about it.
No, I think, look, every house settles. Even new construction is going to settle. Within the first year, you're going to see new construction settle, and you're going to see some stress cracks that happen. That's just the nature of the beast. But essentially, foundation work, you're stabilizing that foundation. It's taken a long time for that foundation to get the way that it is now, and then, yes, you're implying force to raise it up and make some changes. But a lot of times, I mean, you may not be raising this foundation up a lot, right? You may only be raising it 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch in some areas. So really, in some cases, you're closing those sheetrock gaps that have opened up, or you're correcting a door that's out of whack that now is going to shut properly, right, by raising that foundation up. So I don't get on the bandwagon with waiting. For me, everything just follows the system. We get on it, and then if the house settles and has some cracks, for instance, the midterm I did 2 doors down for me, a lot of the cracks showed up, about 5 months after plumbing work was done, because now the house is dry underneath, right?
Okay.
And so now I've got all these cracks everywhere, and I've got a tenant in there, and I feel bad because the tenant's like, I got all these cracks. It's not causing them any damage. It just looks bad.
Right.
But I'll get my guys back in there, and we'll button it up and, fix the sheetrock cracks. It's not a big deal. And there's some doors out of adjustment now that we corrected, to follow the shift. And now that it's settled back down, now I've got to go back and fix those doors again. So,
well, and just as a little insight into DFW specifically, if you're anywhere outside of DFW, you might think this sounds a little weird. If you grew up in Austin, everything's bedrock. It's limestone, and you fix a foundation, it's probably not going a whole lot of anywhere. Here in DFW, a lot of our soil is clay, and when you shift a house in a certain season, there's most likely that clay is either going to be more or less dry. Maybe it's been very rainy and now it's saturated, or it's been really drought temperatures or drought weather. It's really dry and it's contracted a little bit. A lot of people try to do their best to water around foundations, so it normalizes it through the year. But if you're working on an investment, if they haven't taken care of the house inside, I guarantee they have not been minding the foundation on the outside. And so now here you come in and you're starting to shift stuff around. So it's just natural. Whenever we start moving houses, the clay underneath, it expands and contracts with the seasons, and it's just very, very much a part of something that we have to deal with specifically here that maybe other parts of the country they don't as much. But even after you do the very best job you can, it's going to contract a little bit, and when it gets dry, it's going to shift just slightly, and you're going to have these little hairline cracks and different things.
I always use this. Everybody has played with clay at some point in their life, and most people, if they haven't played with any kind of other kind of clay, they've at least played with Play-Doh. And Play-Doh is one of those things, if you leave it out of its container without an airtight container, it's going to dry up hard as a rock. And there's not much you can do to fix that, right? But if you keep it pliable and you add moisture to it and you keep the lid tight, then it stays pliable and it's at its largest state. So that's like how a foundation works, right?
Yep.
Or how our soils work. If they're watered and they're full of moisture, they're going to stay big and fluffy and keep the foundation up. And the minute that they're not getting watered and they dry up hard, then it's going to shrink and it's going to cause things to drop. So, in a lot of cases in plumbing issues, that soil's oversaturated because it's been leaking and leaking and leaking all this plumbing underneath the home. And so when you take all that away and you clean up that and you clean up the leak, it's dry and it's gonna settle more. So that's gonna cause issues. So getting back on, just lining up your trades, lining up those foundation crews to be ready to go day one. I mean, I've literally had people, at the property waiting, and I'm like waiting on the funding, right? I'm like, title company, are we funded yet? Because I got guys over there ready to dig right now. Demo crews ready to go. If you're going to use dumpsters, line up your dumpsters ahead of time so you got a dumpster drop that day. So just getting ahead of it right off the bat and having a game plan ready to roll. I mean, demo typically takes minimum 3 days to a week for me, depending on the size of the project. Obviously, bigger tier 3 stuff is going to take, several weeks of demo.
And that's one area that I will say I made a huge mistake on. Well, as far as trash goes, one good tip that you do is you typically have your guys, maybe after that first haul, it's different, but you normally have your guys put everything if they can, in the garage. And then at some point they come in with a Bobcat and clear it out. I think if you have a job that's probably a 1 or a tier 1 or a 2, you can probably get away with that. If you're tearing down a ton of sheetrock and that sort of thing, I'm guessing you're just going to create more of a dumpster situation. One of the mistakes I made at Polk, and this drove you nuts, and it grew to drive me nuts, was we piecemealed the demo throughout that project. And you would walk that project and you say, why have you not taken this light down yet? Or why did they not take the trim out of this? And I ended up doing it at Mapleton a little bit, where even just a month ago we were walking through and you said, why is the baseboard still in this closet? And those are things that I just didn't really pay attention to. And I had hired demo, but then they did a crappy job. And actually my son and a friend went over there and finished the demo. And there's certain things that I just don't even know to look for. I will say this, you will save yourself and your crews a lot of time. And if you'll just clean the slate, whatever, having the scope of what you're going to do, understanding it to begin with, and say, what does that mean as far as demo goes? We're taking all of this out, all of that out. Go ahead and just clean the slate and then clean up the house to where it's a pretty clean area to work in, because whenever your guys start going in there, it's just natural. If they see a bunch of crap laying around, they're not going to feel just super obligated to throw their stuff away. But if they're going into a cleaner environment, they see everything's dumped out into the garage. That's how you do it. I know that you tell people, I don't know if you put up signs or not, but your people understand where to put their trash. Little things like that, it doesn't sound very important, but those types of things, I think, set yourself up for success over the course of the project. When you have systems in place of saying, this is where you put your trash, this is how I want you to clean up every time, we're taking all this out this time, all those types of things really, I mean, we had to double back multiple times to take out demo and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed yesterday, but I was constantly picking up trash around your job site yesterday and throwing it in the garage, just because it's one of those things, like everybody has a place in the job. And like, for instance, my demo guys, they do multiple things for me, but when they're there, I'm paying them pretty much by the day. So it doesn't really matter the task that I'm asking them to do. They'll do it. But I have to make sure that I'm being clear and they know what to expect from me, and they know what I expect them to do, right? Because if they miss it that day and then I forget to tell them or whatever, and then I'm calling them, then I'm expected to probably pay at least a day, if not, maybe I can get away with a half day, for them to make a trip back and do something minor that they could have just done the first time, or I'm going to do it myself, right? So obviously the goal is not to do it myself, right? To leverage my time and go out and spend better time on lead generating and finding deals and walking new properties. That's where my highest and best use is, right?
And I will say this too. It drives your skilled guys nuts.
Yes.
When you're not ready for them. Or if you're saying, "Oh shoot, can you take that out for me?" You look like you don't know what you're doing, because you don't, and I didn't. But when you're asking your skilled trim guy to demo part of the closet because you forgot, a lot of times they will, but they may end up working it into your deal, your price. They may end up charging you more next time, or they may be not super happy about accepting your job the next time because you just don't quite know what you're doing. And that's, outside of having just a clean slate, your people that are coming in, they want to be able to come in, do their thing, leave, and go to the next job. And the cleaner that more clear cut you can make that for them, the more they're going to want to work with you, and hopefully the better pricing you get as well. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I think having a clean and organized job site, and then just having things lined up and ready to go is extremely important. And as Ashton said, I mean, sometimes you can get the guys to kind of communicate with other trades, and I mean, I have that set up where my painters and my trim carpenters and my drywall guys know each other, and I try to get them to communicate. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. They don't. Again, we talked about this before. They're not really business guys, so they don't like that communication. They don't want to have to do something that's outside their comfort zone. They want to show up, they want to do their job, they want to get it done and move on to the next one and get paid, right? And so it's very important that you are organizing and setting these things up. I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes I'll say that I've seen in competition over the years, is just like simple things like demo not being done. Like, why wasn't this done already? Like, why are we doubling back? Because the fact of the matter is, if it's not demoed, and then your drywall guys come in, they're going to work with what's there. They're not there to make that decision. They're like, I don't know why he left it, but okay, let's work with it. And then it trickles down from there, the paint guys and everybody else. So, like, for instance, those old 1980s surface lights that are 12 inches big left in a ceiling because somebody's like, oh, let's leave it for light. And now the ceiling scraped around it, right? The old acoustic texture is removed, or the popcorn, as people call it, is removed. The light fixture stays on there. You get past that point. Now you get to paint phase. Then the painter works around it if it never gets removed. And then you get ready for light fixtures, and now you bring in a new light fixture, and you've got a big 10-inch ring with a 4 or 5 inch escutcheon that goes to the ceiling. And now you've got a brand new light fixture in there that's installed with an old ring up there that needs to be scraped from texture. It needs to be touched up with texture, and it needs to be painted. So the chances are it's going to ruin your light fixture if they don't remove that escutcheon, which half the time they won't do that. If they're good enough to remove the top part, then they're going to drop it down and then work around it. But then you're like, hey, my house is ready to go. I've got the photographer lined up, and you walk in and you've got this escutcheon hanging down that was never put up, and put it on a 10-foot ceiling, and you're there with your photographer. You don't have a ladder to fix it. Now you've got this funny thing hanging down from the ceiling in your picture. You got to figure out how to edit it out, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, I know for me at Polk, the big mistake was along those lines was texture. And I know I mentioned it in one of my videos is I didn't really pay attention to texture early on. And you're taking in so much with this new house, and you've got these big plans, and I want to do that, move this wall, and I want to, we're going to do the bathrooms this way, and all the big things kind of take over. And sometimes if I would have paused and if I would have known better early on, the very first thing of demo, I would have had them scrape ceilings everywhere. Like you're saying, take those lights down, scrape ceilings, take trim down right up to the cabinets to where they can scrape things. That way, when your texture guy comes in, he's not piecemealing it together. He can do this huge, just one pass job with texture everywhere, and it's going to look way more consistent. Whereas how I did it, and I ended up going through a couple of different crews, and they all have different techniques, and they all have got different tools that they're using. It just looked a little bit more piecemeal. It looked fine at the end of the day, but it drove me nuts having a slightly different texture in the hallway and in the stairwell, and this ceiling was slightly different. Mapleton's better. It's not perfect because of my choice of skill that I used to get the texture on the walls, but it is better, and it's more consistent throughout the house. It may be consistently not great, but it's more consistent. And so, again, we kind of beating this idea of do everything you can to clean the slate. That way, whoever's coming into work can do a very, very good, consistent job throughout the house. So I know you have a few more points, but I'm curious, how do you, I know we've talked about this before, how do you prepare for a flip financially? Do you set up a certain checking account or a bank account for each flip? Do you have a specific credit card per flip? How do you prepare? Because you're going to be opening up a new account with the electric company. You're going to be opening up a new account with the gas, and maybe it's a new city. Let's say city of Richardson. You've got to go down to the city, open up an account for water and trash. And if you wait and you're not prepared for that, now you're putting it into some random card or on a random account. You're having to go back and account for that. What can people do to prepare from that standpoint for a new job?
Yeah, so I have, my flips and my flips and kind of my overall business expenses for my entity that handles those kind of acquisitions is Westbrook Renovation. So I have a couple different accounts. One account that's kind of the general operating expenses, and then I have another account that is basically, I call it the fix and flip account. So what I'll do is I have that main account that handles kind of overall expenses of the business, and I put utilities in that overall expenses of the business because it's easier just to track it that way versus trying to track it individually to my rehab account. So I'll just basically put it in there as lump sum expenses, right? Utilities are part of that that expense. And I'll do it that way. Same thing with, having, my interest payments and stuff like that will actually come out of my main operating account. But then my fix and flip, I'll put draws in there. And so I basically will track it on the spreadsheet, but I'll say, hey, I just put $20,000 in there for this job, $15,000 in there for this job. And then as I get draws back from the bank, then I just reconcile it and I put that money back in there, and then I just reconcile it on my spreadsheet. I keep a ledger, just like a bank ledger, but I do it individually for flip. And so I do it that way, and it keeps it in track, and then it keeps it segregated from my monthly subscriptions and just different accounts that come out of the operating account. and I only use the fix and flip specifically for that. Then, and in addition to that, I have several accounts set up with vendors. So, my carpentry trim company, my framing supply materials, that comes out of that account, and it basically is a credit account that you're due in 30 days. So I can order materials, and then I get invoiced, and I pay that back. Same with the company we use out of Carrollton for, light fixture, ceiling fans, trim hardware, etc. So several of my vendors are set up that way on like a monthly credit, account that's set up that way. And other than that, I mean, I use debit accounts just direct to my bank, and that way I'm not getting too complicated with getting the credit cards and then going specific to that job. If I do, again, I'm just going to track it in my ledger and then pay it back and track it that way, right, individually. But I know that there's competition out there that kind of run their credit accounts up as a big lump sum, and that can get very confusing when you do it that way. So I make sure that any of my vendors, even though they have me as a total account, I make sure that every job has its own separate PO, and that way there's an invoice, and I put it on every check, and I track it that way of matching invoice numbers, so that way there's no confusion. If there's some job that gets a credit account or, it hasn't been paid yet, that way it's always specific down to the exact dollar. And I never double up invoices. So, like, some people will double up their invoices and pay it. Like, hey, I've got 3 invoices from this company. I'm going to pay it in one check. I never do that. I keep it separate because then I can go back to my spreadsheet, and I can also check my check software that we use. We have digital check software that we cut checks from. So I have multiple ways to go back in and double check to see if I cut that check or not. And then I can check it, obviously, in my bank account to see if it cleared. But, we've learned those from the hard way, right? In the very beginning, I mean, 13 years ago, whenever I started doing this, we did it lump sum. And we had problems, and we would double up and pay triple invoices at one time, et cetera. And, the companies that had my account set up would just apply a credit to the account. So if you had an outstanding balance of $10,520, they didn't care how many properties that went to or what it went to. But if I was doing this at the time, I was doing this for other investors. So I was putting on my account and getting it reimbursed or waiting on a check to come through. So if there was a delay in that, they would just take the money and apply it. So if I had a $3,000 payment and I applied it and I thought it was for ABC property, and they applied it to XYZ property, it would completely throw off the accounting. We learned the hard way, and that's why we do it this way now.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people do it differently, but the long and short of it is have a system, be able to keep your properties separate. And if you're like me right now, I'm doing one, but there was a time when I was doing the two, and you have different charges coming through. Be specific on your checks that you're writing, your memos, keeping your receipts. I'm still learning all that. I actually just got into a bookkeeper. She's helping me keep all of that straight. So, moving forward, I'll be doing better and better with that. So, and then one of the things. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, training your trades on how you operate is the most important thing, right? Because everybody operates differently. So my guys know I want an invoice separate for each property for everything. So, they're like, well, I don't have invoices. Here, I'm going to text you and just Zelle me. Okay, fine. Send me I don't care if you go to CVS and buy a little invoice book.
Yeah.
I need an invoice. I need to be able to track it. So,
and I need to be better at that. Yeah.
And the important part on that is, again, if there's ever a problem arises or they're like, hey, you never paid this, now you've got history of it and specifically what it is. So a lot of my guys have had to be trained, what I want, what I expect.
Well, plus you also train them that you pay on Fridays. And
my wife did that, and that was the best thing ever.
Yeah, because, for me, you just trickle it out. Like we're sitting here, I'm getting blown up by the guy doing the trash yesterday.
Yeah.
Because, it's 15 minutes after he did his job, so of course he's ready to be paid, and he doesn't have Zelle, so he wants a check. So
that's when you tell them, like, I paid it, that you just have to control that.
Yeah.
You have to tell them, You send me invoices, for instance, for whatever time works for you. For me, it works to pay my guys on Fridays, and I get invoices by Thursday. And I'm like, if I don't get it by end of business on Thursday, don't ask for a check on Friday. It'll be next Friday.
Yeah.
And that's just the way I operate. Now, every once in a while, I'll make an exception if somebody's in a tight pinch and I know the guy, and or it's a one-off trade that I haven't used before. I know that he's not yet adapted to that system.
Yeah.
But I just have to kind of make it that way. Otherwise, you drive yourself insane chasing these guys around and making life convenient for them. Right. And I know how much you're paying this little handyman guy of yours, and he might be, I think he's moldable, but he's already gotten way spoiled, right? Yeah. So it's like, that's how one of my main guys, Pablo, is, that just did your landscape for you at Mapleton. He's worked for me since 2009, and he's kind of my all-around guy, but we've learned how we both operate. We've learned the system, and I pay him a lot of money. Mm-hmm. He's usually my most consistent trade that I'm paying every week for something. Mm-hmm. But and he's good, but it's also like, it's setting boundaries. Yeah. So that way there's some kind of, measurable expectation on what you're going to have him do. If you're going to have him do odd jobs, okay, either figure out an hourly rate or figure out a daily rate or figure out something that's a little bit more, consistent, because it seems like this guy's willing to work. Yeah. He just, his expectation of what he's making for what he's doing and the babysitting that you're having to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got to learn those boundaries. And I mean, this goes back to, preparing yourself for success and having a good crew. When you're new like me and you're starting out, you're feeling all that out. I started out with a general contractor. I had to shift. I had to start finding my own people. I tried some on my own. You had some early on. I did everything from people walking up on the job like this guy. I found people that hit me up on Facebook. There's people out there that you can find. Obviously, the best way is something, now that I have your guys, you are tested with them, what they can do, basically what they charge. They know the system. That's fantastic. I understand not everyone's going to have that. The faster you can get consistent with it, and like you're saying, come up with some boundaries, come up with some even just arbitrary rules. Hey, I pay on Friday. I need an invoice. If I had just started saying that, who's going to argue with that? Look,
the other big thing is ask for their W-9, right? And if they don't have it, send it to them, and try to get it. Now, obviously, I've got some trades, that don't have that, I make it work, or they're valuable enough to keep around and work through that headache. Mm-hmm. But on the other side, the majority of people, do, but you need to ask for it at least up front the first time you pay them, or hire them again and ask for it the second time at least, so that you have it. Because come tax time, they're like, oh, I don't have one, or you can't get a hold of them, or they don't answer the phone. So
yeah, right.
that burden becomes your burden if you don't have it, right?
Yeah, right. So. Well, I know that we're closing in on our time, and we're going to get into the next phase, and actually some of the stuff the sequencing. I think the next thing that we could talk about, and I've had a huge learning curve, is how do you actually know? We talked about foundation should be first. Okay, what's next? Who can you stack on top of each other? Who can work concurrently? Who has to go first? Who has to go last? Why you shouldn't wait? Why you shouldn't get your floors finished mid project, even though the guy said he can be there and he's going to give you a little bit of a discount. There's certain things that you shouldn't do, and so tune in the next time, and we will start getting into some of these do's and don'ts of, okay, you want to definitely always hire a skilled trade for this. Don't do a jack of all trades for this. And you for sure want to do this before you do the next step. And so we'll get into some of those details. But I hope you have enjoyed this insight. Tavis has just years and years of experience, and I have a couple years of learning, and I'm constantly learning and making mistakes. And I'm on this hockey stick learning curve where I'm just, every day is new, and I don't have all those systems in place, just like a lot of people who are getting started. And I'm doing it working full time, so I'm trying to do it on the run texting people while I'm at a red light between certain things and with my therapy job. So it can become a lot. And so a lot of these things are actually put in place to make yourself efficient and sane and profitable and all those sort of things. So Tavis, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, give them an insight into where to find you.
Yes, I'm like Tavis with
Tavis without the R. You're Travis with. Let me do it for you. It's been a long morning. You're still drinking your coffee.
What happened with that?
If you want to get in touch with Tavis, you can find him on Instagram and on Facebook. Mostly, it's like Travis without the R, and he's there, and he's always posting awesome videos of his walkthroughs and his different investments. There, he has not mentioned this in a while, but he has Tavis Westbrook Designs, where he and another guy do amazing design work. They can come up with full-scale CAD drawings and full-scale 3D modeling of designs, and Tavis does a great job of materials and spacing and a lot of the artistic stuff that you would not necessarily know. A guy who can also manage a job with concrete and 2x4s can also actually do a really good job designing a project. So he has some great projects under his belt that he's gotten some awards for. So if you have any design work that you would like, or at least some to sit down with a consultation with Tavis, I know he's open to that too. So if you want to get in touch with me, Instagram, Facebook, Ashton Hines, Dallas Real Estate Guy. If you like this podcast, if you find any value in it, please like, subscribe, share it with a friend. Tell them that we will be back for the next Friday episode of the Real Estate Heavyweights podcast. We hope you have a great week, and we'll check with you next time.